Hey guys, what's going on? It's Big and welcome back to another Elestrals video. It's been a hot minute. In fact, okay, we're good. If you're wondering where I looked to make sure my mic was not muted. This is now the second time I'm recording this. The first time I recorded this, this was an hour-long recording. My mic was muted the entire time. So, just to make sure I'm not going to be going crazy, I'm going to zoom through a lot of the cards I don't really have much of an opinion on, but the cards that I talked about when my mic was muted that I do have a strong opinion on, I will quickly talk about that. The only other thing I desperately want to talk about is, well, not desperately, but the only other thing I really want to talk about is the AOS cards, because when I did this video first with my mic muted, the AOS cards were not out yet. So I haven't actually really had an opportunity to talk about those cards, so we'll get into that. But quickly, a couple of things I have to say. I'm back home for spring break. I'm currently in a weird setup because my desktop computer is basically dead. We don't really know what's going on with it, but the desktop back home is basically dead. Well, we know what's going on, but we don't know how to fix it. It currently is with Geek Squad. Hopefully they can try to figure out a way to fix it sooner rather than later. So I'm currently using my laptop, so if things look a little weird, now you kind of know why. Second thing, because I'm using my laptop, I can't see where my face cam is. Like typically I have the two monitor setup. I have the monitor right in front of me and the monitor right over here. And on the monitor to the side, I can typically just see where my face cam is, and I can always align myself. Without having that, I can't see if my face is aligned with the face cam, so I might come in and out of frame. That's a long-winded, that was a long-winded way of me saying I might come in and out of frame. And I won't know, so hopefully it doesn't happen. If it does, I apologize in advance. But that's going to do it. Let's get right on into the reveal. So we're going to start off with the cards I don't really have much opinions on. Panderson and Verdolith seem kind of fine, but I don't really... I feel like these cards, tacking them into sort of an existing Earth deck might be somewhat difficult, but we also have not seen, I assume at least, we haven't seen every single Champion of Demeter card. If we have, I feel like this could be not so amazing, but... if there are more Champion Demeters that we have yet to see, I'm excited to see them. I think Rummikol and Scavical are absolute dog water. They are so bad. Volcaries has potential because Volcaries can actually search out the Hephaestus. Hephaestus, you can just enchant it with one, disenchant, search an artifact, and cast that artifact with the spirit that you used the Hephaestus with. That, to me, doesn't seem that bad, especially since you can use the artifact to give the Volcaries an additional +2 attack with the Torch of Hestia, for example, and it becomes a 6 attacker for 2 mana, for 2 spirits, I should specify, but it's kind of interesting. The Scout and Majursa, I think these cards are very, very interesting, and I'm excited to sort of test out Bears, see if Bears is actually somewhat meta viable now. I'm not entirely certain if this is enough, but I also feel like we haven't seen all of the Champion Hestia cards. I imagine we're also going to get an Scout and Seer. I assume we're going to get those as Champion Hestia. Well, maybe not actually, because Majursa comes right after the Scout. So maybe I'm completely wrong. But it definitely feels like this has the potential. These cards have the potential to be incredibly powerful. I definitely want to actually talk about the Majesty stuff. The Keone stuff is kind of bad. I don't really care for the Keone stuff. Narpoon, the Whalance. I think Whalance is interesting, but not super amazing. If we go down here to the other Keone stuff, I think Scout or Scout is kind of bad. It's not like the worst thing in the world. It's fine, but I feel like this can very easily be countered, and it's overall not like the best thing in the world. Broomalinx can actually come in. This card can actually be very, very good in existing Frost Nexus builds, because this card basically says you no longer have to play Jolton, so therefore the amount of Frost Spirits you can play in your deck actually goes up. Whether or not that's good, I highly doubt it, but it is at least a little bit better than just casting Jolton and searching out your mountains. Broomalinx now can just go ahead and do that. I think the new Frigid Cup and the new Chivalry, I think these cards are terrible. I genuinely do not think these cards will see any play because Frigid Cup just says return a Blizzard from Underworld to hand. Great, now you can pop an additional back row, and that will cost you an additional spirit, and you already had to cast a spirit. You already had to use a spirit to cast out the Frigid Cup. That's 5 spirits just to pop 2 back row. I think that sucks, especially when we already have Hurricane, which has the potential to pop 4 back row, and it costs 3. I think this card, and also, well, no, okay, both of them, the restriction are face down runes, but I just do not think that's good. And Chivalry has the exact same problem that old Chivalry has, and the fact that you cannot special cast Chivalry. You cannot get it out with ease, which makes it a very bad card. And I don't even think its effect is that good, I'm going to be entirely honest. The Champion Apollo cards, I think, are genuinely some of the worst Champion cards out of so far that we've seen in the entire set. At least with the Kione cards, there is maybe something cool you can do with them with, like, the Kione stuff. I genuinely do not see any way that the Apollo cards are playable. Soulbow has potential to be fine in existing solar decks. Soulstocks, I think, is just a little bit too weird to get out, so I don't really think this is going to see that much play. I think Exaltus is just absolutely terrible. I genuinely think this card is very bad. If you want a more in-depth explanation as to why I think Exaltus sucks, let me know in the comments, and I'll tell you every single use case I see for this card, and I think all of those use cases are very bad. Plucky actually genuinely has potential as well, because when you normal cast it, you can search out a Lyre of Apollo and add it to your hand. Lyre is a 1-cost artifact that says the Empowered Elestrals attack and defense is flipped, and all your Champion of Apollo cards get +2/+2. So, for example, if you go Plucky, search Lyre, and then Lyre, and Lyre put it, enchant, what is it? Empower the Plucky. Plucky becomes a 5/3, which is good, but for 2 spirits, and the fact, well, you do heal 1 if you cast a solar rune, so there is at least that. The fact of the matter is that if they destroy the Lyre, you're just dead. Now, to be entirely honest, the only ways, to my knowledge, the only ways in the game that you can realistically destroy the Lyre is with Thunderstorm and P-Gust. And I guess technically you can also set the Lyre with like a old Broomalanx. And I think there might be another card that can set, well, Earth Scout. Well, no, Earth Scout can't because it has to be a face down rune, so never mind, that doesn't work. Plucky seems somewhat fine. I feel like Lyre is not very good. I think Soulbow has potential just due to the fact that it's a free cast. I think Soulstocks is bad. I think Exaltus is horrendous, I'm not gonna lie. We'll quickly get back to Artemis because I did actually skip a couple of dudes. Let's talk quickly about the Zeus line. So far, I think this is kind of bad. I don't really see any of these seen play currently, but we have yet to see all the Champion of Zeuses. So we'll see what more we get with the Champion of Zeuses. I think Elechick is just a bad card. Gryffuse seems fine. Gryffuse genuinely seems very, very fine, but in order for me to really judge Gryffuse, I need to see the other Champion of Zeuses. Voltempest is sort of a very telegraphed card, and it's also an incredibly expensive card, which is sort of the problem I have with it. I think this card is very, very cool, but I'm a little afraid that it's not going to be as powerful as a lot of people might think it is. I'm a little skeptical. I'm a little skeptical of Voltempest, because the thing about Voltempest is that there's 4 restrictions on it. It has to specifically be a champion. Actually, there might be 5. There's 5 restrictions, actually. It has to be a Champion of Zeus card. The card has to be destroyed in battle. You have to cast it properly enchanted. You have to have Zeus enchanted, and you have to control no Elestrals when that Elestral is destroyed. There's so many restrictions on this card, and I understand why there's so many restrictions, is because this is an incredibly powerful effect, because during the battle phase, if you can just get a 14/7, your opponent might not have a way to deal with that. And even if they do, like, the only potential way I could see them dealing with this is through maybe a PTA, but that's now costing them 4 spirits. Shield of Achilles as well as a 4 spirit. You can temporarily stop with a Gorgon's Gaze. You can, I guess, put it in defense position with the Tsunami, but it also still has 7 defense. The only realistic way you're going to be able to deal with this is with Resting on Your Laurels or Earthquake, but on your turn you can't cast that, so you're at least guaranteed to force them to expend something in order. So if this Volt Tempest hits the board, I think it's a very, very powerful card. The only problem I see with it is just the amount of restrictions that are on it that make it not super amazing. We'll come back to the A-list cards because I want to talk about those separately, but the Hermes cards seem very interesting. Carrion specifically seems very good. For anyone who does not know, Hermes is a new Divine Rune that says that you can disenchant 2 wind from it to send a Wind Elestral from your deck to the other. Or is it Wind Elestral or is it any Elestral? Let me double check that. Hermes says I can't read that. let's scroll. Hermes, search your deck for a Wind Elestral and send it to the underworld. So that is what Hermes does. Carrion is a free cast off of that because it just once it's sent, you special cast it using a Wind Spirit from your Spirit deck or your Underworld. Carry off is removal, which is very good. Exalter seems kind of bad. I don't think we've seen every single champion of Hermes. So if we see more, in fact, I'm pretty sure we haven't because we have 1, 2, and then there's 2 between the Carry off and the Exalter, so I assume we haven't. The Exalter, though, seems interesting if there's an easy way to cast it from the Underworld, which we have seen right here. Caduceus. When the Empowered Elestral is destroyed, a battle target another 1 spirit, Wind Elestral in your Underworld and special cast it. And you can also... my bad. You can also search it with the Talaria of Hermes, which seems very, very interesting. So I do genuinely think there is a lot of potential for the Exalter. But we need to see a little bit more. I think Carrion is actually very good for existing Wind decks because you can just send it to the Underworld, special cast it, boom, you're good. And then Hermes is obviously removal. We've already talked about you, and then Artemis is the last one I really want to talk about before I get into the guys I have yet to talk about. So let's talk about Pandolence first. Pandolence I think is bad. I just don't think this card's good. This card is just basically turns Dense Fog into a burn spell. I don't think that's very good. Specterus is kind of interesting because it is a special cast, so if you go Dense Fog into special cast Specterus into normal cast, like, I don't really think there's anything. You can normal cast a Like a Void and just grab a bunch of Werepups. That to me genuinely seems kind of fine. And we'll talk about the Werepups Like a Void. I think these cards are insane, but they are situational. So Werepup specifically is the most situational here in my opinion, where your opponent has to have 2 suppressed cards. So the best way for you to actually do this is if you Dense Fog and then normal cast it. Because Dense Fog would give, but the only way that's going to work is if they have 2 Elestrals on board. So if they don't have 2 Elestrals on board, then you can't get your Like a Void out very easily. But again, that is sort of where the Specterus comes in. If you Dense Fog them, Specterus, normal, ascend over to Specterus into a Like a Void, then you can go ahead and swarm your board with the Werepups. Yes, they come out suppressed, but that's totally fine because then you can destroy a suppressed Elestral to destroy a suppressed Elestral in your opponent's field and then get in for 4 damage. That's incredibly powerful. So, but the question really comes down to, is that good enough in existing Lunar decks, or is it good enough in its own version of a deck? That's sort of, we have to sort of see that, but I definitely think there is a lot of potential with these cards. Pandolence is the only one I think is genuinely bad. I think if you have to play this card, have it survive a turn in order for you to really get any value off of it. And then just go into a Like a Void to burn your opponent for maybe 2 spirits. To me, that seems very bad because you have to hope that Pandolence stays alive. So that's sort of my problem. If this is a 5, I could maybe see it, but the fact that it's a 4 is making it a little worse in my opinion. So that's sort of my opinion. I'm not really going to talk about a whole lot of the cards down here. Actually, I will talk about some of the invokes. I don't really care for the artifacts. Anvil to me is very bad. Torch seems fine, but not the best thing in the world. And then Caduceus is meh. Talaria makes the Caduceus a little bit better, but I'm not the biggest fan of Caduceus. So that's sort of what I'm thinking of there. However, for the invokes, Reforge sucks. Reforge is terrible. This card, do not play this card. This card is very bad in my opinion. And I do not think it will see any play. Poseidon's Fury is very interesting. This is a very interesting form of removal. And I think could be very annoying in certain instances. Obviously, you get to play Majesty with this, which just makes that even more annoying. Water can turn into a very annoying deck to go up against in the upcoming meta game, which is interesting because Water is going to be potentially meta in Firestorm meta, which is kind of interesting to think about. But Zeus's Call as well can just obviously search for Champion of Zeus. So if Champion of Zeus are good, this will be good. I think that's pretty obvious to understand there. Poseidon's Fury, though, is interesting because I think this card could genuinely see play in non-Champion of Poseidon decks. So that could actually be very, very interesting. But let me take a quick sip of water. Let's get into the cards that we did not talk about, and let's start from the top. I'm actually going to talk about Aeolus a little bit. I'm going to talk about Aeolus last because that was the last one that got revealed. Let's quickly talk about these two cards here. Viserys and Panzer. So, this is also something that we were seeing with Frigicup and Chivalror. They were actually first ones released that had this sort of interesting game design. This is game design I'm not a big fan of. I'm not the biggest fan of this type of design. It's the same name as an existing card, but it has a different effect. So they both take the exact same slot in the deck. So for example, with Viserys, the old Viserys is semi-limited, so you can play 2 of that and 1 of this. Is basically what that is. If the other Viserys was unlimited, you could play 3 of one or 3 of the other or anything in between. So you can play 3 total Viserys because it's not a title card, but they do have different effects. So they're fighting for the exact same slot, but you can play different effects of each. The only reason I'm not a big fan of this is because I think this is incredibly confusing, especially to new players, because we have... Well, first of all, it's confusing because it's the exact same name of a card, but it has a different effect. So when I first saw this, I genuinely thought that this was, you can play 3 of old Viserys and 3 of new Viserys. That's what I thought it was. That's not the case. Because he then immediately explained it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. The reason why I think this is bad game design, personally, is because we've already seen the solution to this in Charcoon. Charcoon is so far the only card in the game that has this line of text. This card is always treated as Sirikun, or maybe the word always isn't in there, but it's something like that. It says in parentheses right off the bat, this card is treated as Sirikun, which is the exact same sort of thing here, where it is treated as Sirikun. It means it's treated as Sirikun in deck building. Deck building, and maybe you can disagree with me here and say that Charcoon is Charcoon is a worse way of making this restriction. It's a worse way of doing this game design than what we're doing here with Viserys and Panzer. If you make that argument, that's totally fine. I can agree. But I feel like we already had one way to do it, and we should have just stuck with that one way. Because now, what I personally think, what I'm trying to get at, what I'm trying to get at with this is, I think that Viserys, Panzer, Frigicup, and Chivalror, the 4 cards so far that have been revealed in the set, that have this sort of game design attached to them, they should all have had different names from the original counterparts, but they should have all had a line of text that says this card is treated as the original. Obviously, for something like Panzer, that would have been very difficult, because Panzer has 5 total lines of text, and you can't really fit that much into that. So I can sort of understand, in one way, how you might not want to do that, because you have to fit a lot of text into a card. But if you didn't want to do that, I genuinely think you just make it a different card. That's, to me, what I personally think. I think this is a very weird way to do it, and can get very, very confusing. That being said, let's get into the actual cards themselves. I'm going to talk about Panzer first, because I have a gripe about new Viserys. So new Panzer, though, is very, very interesting. When you cast Panzer, enchant a number of Earth to this Panzer up to the number of Elestrals on an opponent's field. So, for example, they only have 1 guy, then you can only enchant 1 onto it. And when this Panzer is destroyed in battle, you can draw a card for each enchanting spirit on it. This is very interesting, because let's say, for example, we have a very basic board state. Your opponent controls a galaxy and no other cards. You normal cast Panzer. Panzer, then you get to enchant 1 onto that Panzer, and then you attack into that galaxy, your Panzer dies, you draw 2. Is that good? Probably not. The instances in which I think this card is very good is when you're not playing it to destroy, you're not trying to destroy itself, you're playing it into a board where your opponent has a lot of Elestrals on the board. Even if it's just 2 Elestrals, you play Panzer into that board, you enchant 2 onto it, and then you just basically either attack their small guys, or you just leave it on board and let them keep their board. Now they're in a position where they need to either use removal on this card, which, to be fair, isn't that difficult. We still have Earthquake and Wrestlings in the game, and this card is unaffected by, Cryoblast, unless you double Cryoblast it. So that's at least something. Obviously, you can Cryoblast into a Zeus and then it destroys it. If that is something to do, then sure. But Panzer, this card seems genuinely interesting because it puts your opponent in a weird dilemma of, do I hit this and let them draw 3, or do I just wait until I can deal with it with removal? It puts them in a very weird spot, because either they have to deal with it with removal right then and there, or else you're going to draw a ton, or they just say, I don't care about this, and you draw a ton, and now you have a big way to come back into the game. To me, that genuinely seems kind of fine. Whether or not it's good, we have to put that up to testing. I don't know. I genuinely do not know whether or not this card is good. I honestly, though, want it to be good because I think that's a very, very interesting effect. Let's talk about Viserys. This card is a problem, in my opinion. So, let's talk about it this way. Why was Old Viserys so good? Old Viserys was so good because it allowed you to swarm the board, and it allowed you to swarm it very easily. You would play a Viserys, smack a guy. Viserys is a 5, so that's already very good. You go smack a guy, cast out another Viserys. Either you leave it there and they have to now deal with your other Viserys, or you can, if you have it, alter a stars, change the Viserys to attack position, hit again, get another Viserys out, and now you have 3 7 bodies your opponent has to deal with, and that was all happening in one damage step. That was all one battle phase. That's insane. That's insane. So, what did they do to fix this? They semi-limited Viserys. That's good. I like that. That was a very good decision on their part. And then they bring out Old Viserys. Sorry, New Viserys. This card says this Viserys gets +1 attack for each Viserys on the field. While there is another Viserys on your field, this Viserys is unaffected by opponent's counterrunes. What makes this better than Old Viserys? Well, it's not better than Old Viserys. Old Viserys is still a lot better. However, this is a great Viserys to run in specifically the 3rd slot of your deck. This is the 3rd Viserys to run, and this is better. This is a better 3rd Viserys than old 3rd Viserys. What do I mean by that? In the old scenario where when Viserys was unlimited, you could play 3 guys in your deck, you would have 7 guys onto the board. However, every single one of them was vulnerable to counterrunes. Now, in this position, if you do that exact same scenario, Viserys, hit a guy, get a second Viserys, alter a stars, swap it to attack, hit another guy, rather than getting a vanilla Viserys, you can get yourself New Viserys, who is now unaffected by counter runes. That is just straight up better than Old Viserys. What I'm trying to get at, New Viserys is back, unless somehow with all the support that we're getting, with all the cards coming out in Firestorm, Viserys ends up being power crept, which currently I don't see that being the case, but maybe when testing comes around, this is bad. This will come back. Viserys will make a comeback. Now, I do want to mention one other thing. There's one instance in which this is worse. Playing 2 of old, 1 of new is worse than playing 3 old. And that is, you have less consistent access to getting to Old Viserys, because you still only get to play 2 copies of Old Viserys, so the ability to swarm the board is less consistent because you can only play 2 of that guy rather than 3. What I mean by that is you play 2 of Old Viserys and 1 of New Viserys. When you had 3 of Old Viserys legal, it didn't matter which Viserys you drew, you always had one guy in your hand if you drew a Viserys to start swarming the board. Now if you draw New Viserys as in your opening hand, you don't have the ability to swarm the board because New Viserys doesn't have that ability. So that is the only downside. That is the only downside that I personally see to this entire thing. Overall, I think this is much, much better than playing 3 of Old Viserys, because I don't care that much about the consistency. You're playing 2 of Old, 1 of New. There's still a higher likelihood that you're going to hit Old before you hit New. That's still a higher likelihood because of how, probability works. I think this card is a bit of a problem, and I think the potential way that you are going to solve this is limit Old Viserys. I think if you limit Old Viserys with this card legal, obviously don't do it yet. Maybe if they want to preemptively do it, that's fine. But I personally believe what they should do is limit. They need to limit Old Viserys. They need to basically wait for the set to come out, see how the metagame shifts up, and if what I'm saying ends up being true, it will limit Old Viserys, and I think this whole thing gets fixed. Because now no longer can you just start swarming the field with guys that are unaffected by counter-ins. You can swarm one guy, and then you also have to hope that your Old Viserys survives so you can swarm the other guy. To me, that still feels very good. If you get to play 1 of Old, 2 of New, I actually think that is somewhat pretty good. But that's my gripe with this card and why I'm not looking forward to it when Firestorm releases, because I think we might be seeing Viserys is back. And it's back better than ever. We've already talked about some of these cards. The only other cards I think I really wanted to talk about, besides the Aeolus cards, were the Poseidon cards. Guys, this looks insane. These look insane. So for anyone who has not seen these cards, let me read them for you. Sluggo Championess Poseidon is a 1 water 1/3. When this Sluggo receives 1 or more water with Poseidon's effect, you can special send this Sluggo to Globby from your hand or deck. There's obviously a new Globby you can get, but I think a lot of people are sort of sleeping on old Globby, and I'll explain that in a second. But new Globby is a 5/8. When you cast this Globby, search your deck for an Atlantis or a Rise from the Depths and add it to your hand. Obviously, those are very powerful cards in their own right. This is just a very good Water Reanimator support. But also, Majesty. Majesty, 6/14. While Poseidon is enchanted and this Majesty is in attack position, spirits enchanting Elestrals are water instead of their original element. You can return up to 2 water from your underworld to your spirit deck if this Majesty is in defense position. So what does this mean? What this means is that as long as you open new Sluggle and Poseidon, you can turbo into Majesty and have a lingering floodgate that your opponent now has to deal with. How do I mean that? So, new Sluggle says when it receives 1 or more water with Poseidon's effect, special send it to a Globby. So if you open Sluggle and you open Poseidon, you normal cast Sluggle, Champion of Poseidon, then you go Poseidon and Nexus 1 onto it. Sluggle will ascend into Old Globby. Old Globby has the effect to, if it has 3 water enchanting it, special ascend into Majesty. That can also get you into New Majesty, which gives you a crazy, powerful floodgatey type effect right out of the gate. Is that good? It has potential to be good. The issue is you are now super susceptible to removal, and that costs you 4 spirits to do. Plus, you still need to keep Poseidon enchanted, so at least 1 more spirit to still have the Poseidon on board. At most, this costs you... at the very least, this costs you 5 spirits. If you enchanted more into your Poseidon, it could cost you upwards of 7 spirits just to do this, and then you lose to 1 copy of Resting on Your Laurels, and your opponent only spent 1 to do that. You spent potentially 7, up to 7. That, to me, feels very bad. However, this is not how I think you play this. I think you play this in a bit more of a control style, where you don't just turbo into this card. You wait until you feel like you have you're in a position where your opponent either doesn't have removal in their hand or has already gone through the removal. Then you come into Majesty, put in an attack position, and now every single one of your opponent's Elestrals are misenchanted unless they are water. Now, I do want to mention, there are a lot of ways around this. Not only can you still play Resting, you can play Earthquake, but you can also still play Eddy. Eddy can just swap Majesty to defense position, and now all of a sudden, you no longer have to worry about all your Elestrals being misenchanted, because at least for one turn, Majesty does not have that as a restriction. Because obviously you normal cast Eddy with water, and actually, to be entirely honest, you don't even need to do that. You can now just cast it with like Earth or something, Majesty makes it become water, and you get the effect of Eddy off anyway. So there are counterplays to this. There's a lot of counterplays. I don't think this card is going to be as annoying as I think a lot of people are sort of thinking. It's still crazy. This effect is still insane. And also, if you don't need that Floodgate attack effect, you can just put it in defense and you automatically have a heal every turn. So that's actually very, very good. I genuinely think there's a lot going on here. I think this Majesty is very powerful, whether it's an attack or defense. It's very situational. I think these cards are sick. I think Poseidon is really eating well with these cards. But I believe that is all there is to talk about, with the exception of the AOS cards. So let's go ahead and talk about the new AOS cards. We don't have, actually I haven't even talked about Hibernation, but I sort of already, I kind of talked about it when I talked about the Bears. Genuinely, I think Ursaden's obviously now a much more playable card than it was in the past. But that's beside the point. Let's get into the AOS cards. Now the reason I want to talk about the AOS cards is that, I'm just going to say this outright, I do not have an opinion on these cards. I have no idea if these cards are good, if they are bad. I genuinely do not know. The only card I'm pretty certain is bad is Titanostalk. This card, it's not terrible. Like, it's better than old Titanostalk, but it's by no means, I think, going to be played in Wind decks, because it's just a 2/5 that can Nexus Wind and can enchant a Wind into your board. It's also an Earth, which makes it a little bit worse. However, it is a 2/5, so it at least has 5 defense, so it's a little bit difficult to get over. And it can very much help your game plan if you are Wind, because you can actually, like, if you have an enemy sale on board, you can heal a ton. You can use this if you have a P-Gust on board to pop 2 cards. That's not terrible by any means. The issue is this card requires setup. It requires setup that's already on board. The only potential way I can see this being used without any existing setup is if you open Titanostalk AOS or Titanostalk Hermes, something like that. You go Titanostalk, Nexus from the Divine onto itself, enchant Wind onto itself, and now it has an Earth, a Wind, and a Wind on it, and that could potentially set you up for maybe like a Flammomoth, a Stratomoth. Any 3-drop Wind, it can set you up for that. And that to me doesn't seem the worst thing in the world, especially since it's 5 defense. It's difficult to get over. Pair that with the fact that you could potentially have an Island of Aeolia, and with that whole combo, this goes up to 7 defense and 4 attack. So even if they eddy into it, you still have the exact same amount of attack as them. And that's assuming you have the Island of Aeolia up. But this card has a lot of potential, but I'm not certain if this is going to change the way. I don't really think Wind needs a card like this. I feel like Wind already has a ton of cards that are incredibly powerful. It's a matter of sort of making it so that the issue with Wind currently, at least with like one of my favorite decks in Wind Burn, is the fact that it requires a lot of setup. You not only need like your Divine Rune on the board, you need Exaltair on board, you need Top Swarm on board. If one of those guys just does not stick, you're not in a position to really do anything about it. If they do stick, you're in a great spot, but you have to have them stick. And that's the real big problem. A lot of the power for this card, though, for this deck, comes down to these cards. Sorlet, Chrysor, Galaxy. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. Sorlet is a 4/3. When the Sorlet destroys an Celestial in battle, search your deck for an AOS or Champion of AOS, add it to your hand. It's not a 5 anymore. It's now a 4, so it's a little worse, but it still has a lot of potential in that right. Chrysor can allow you to, if it's in your hand, special ascend it from your Sorlet using Wind during your battle phase if that Sorlet destroyed an Elestral in battle this turn. I genuinely do not know. This can be used with old Sorlet as well. The only problem with that is that you would have to have it, you would have to already have the Chrysor in hand. The Sorlet, the new Sorlet can search Chrysor, so you can go Sorlet, hit a dude, search Chrysor, special ascend it during the battle phase. To me, that feels good. The problem is that something that you can rely on? That is sort of a different story, because I feel like if you are playing this new Sorlet, you are only playing it as a means to search new Chrysor. I really think that is the only reason you would be doing this, because it gives you a 7 body during the battle phase that can attack immediately during the said battle phase. That feels very good, but the amount of stuff that new Sorlet can hit over in comparison to old Sorlet is worse, which makes the card, in my opinion, a lot worse. It's one of those things you just have to test. We just have to constantly be testing and figure it out, because as I said, I genuinely do not have an opinion on these. I cannot, for the life of me, figure out if these cards are good or bad. I need to test out with them and see if they're actually up to snuff or not. However, for that, I am going to wait until all cards are revealed, and because I don't want to like start testing and have like an incomplete package of cards to test from. I want to wait for the entire set to be revealed so I can start testing with all of them. However, there is one other card we have to talk about. It's Galaxir. 1/3. When you add this Galaxir to your hand with Aeolus' effect, you can special cast it with Wind. Again, I just don't know. I feel like this is not as good as the Sorlet Chrysor thing, but still, like, this is still not bad, because one of the big problems with Wind is that they haven't had consistency getting to the 2-drops, to the 3-drops. The deck that just won the most recent webcam tournament was it was Wind. It wasn't really Wind Toolbox, but it was a Wind deck that was playing Falcane, weirdly enough. This can just automatically allow you to get a Falcane out, because you just go, if you open the 2-drop that you need, you go Aeolus, and if you open the 2-drop you need with Aeolus, you go Aeolus effect, search Galaxir. Galaxir can special cast itself immediately, then you normal send over that. The one thing I'm really thinking for this is Old Chrysor. That card is like so close, it can attack directly, and when it deals damage to your opponent, you heal. Like, to me, that seems incredibly powerful, and Galaxir could very easily make that a very, very powerful card. There's a lot going on here. I still do not know if these cards are good or bad. It's just going to be something I have to test. So, guys, I apologize if this video was way too long. I really had a lot of stuff I just wanted to say about these cards, and I'm going to try to not make these videos not as super long in the future by reducing the amount of time in between reveals to talk about each of these cards. So that's gonna do it for this video, guys. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure to slap the like button and subscribe for more. Hope to see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.